It so happens today that we are meeting on the 5th of October, and the 5th of October happens to be celebrated worldwide as International Teachers Day or World Teachers Day. So I felt it would be good of me to bring some kind words to our hard-working teachers on this very special day for them. Today we tend to want to celebrate all of the hard work that they have been doing on our behalf. World Teachers Day is held annually on October 5th to celebrate teachers all around the globe. It commemorates the anniversary of the adoption of the 1966 International Labour Organization, ILO, and UNESCO recommendations concerning the status of teachers, which set benchmarks regarding the rights and responsibilities of teachers and standards for their initial preparation and further education, recruitment, employment, and teaching and learning conditions. The recommendations concerning the status of higher education teaching personnel was adopted in 1997 to complement the 1966 recommendations by covering teaching personnel in higher education. World Teachers Day was first celebrated in 1994 and continues annually up until today. It is co-convened in partnership with the International Labour Organization, ILO, UNICEF, and Education International. These three organizations put out a joint statement on the occasion of this year's World Teachers Day, and the statement reads, "On World Teachers Day, we are not only celebrating every teacher, we are calling on countries to invest in them and prioritize them in global education recovery efforts so that every learner has access to qualified and supported teachers. Let's stand with our teachers." 1.5 years into the COVID-19 crisis, the 2021 World Teachers Day will focus on the support teachers need to fully contribute to the recovery process under the theme, Teachers at the Heart of Education Recovery. Education remains a major footing of our society. An educated society is crucial for economic growth. We need people to continue to learn and research in order to constantly stay innovative. Countries with more educated populations tend to be in better economic situations. More employment opportunities are opened. We have had to make hard decisions, Mr. President, to ensure that despite the pandemic, our children are not robbed of their opportunities for the best possible education. And despite the challenges, our schools remain open, and we intend to keep them so. Our teachers are at the heart of our efforts. We continue to support them in every way possible and call on them to work with us to ensure that we can continue to deliver the highest standard of education. I want to register my thanks, the thanks of the Ministry of Education, and ultimately the thanks of the Nevis Island Administration for the remarkable job that our teachers have been doing and for the work that they continue to do for this generation and for the ones to follow. I take the opportunity to wish all of our teachers, past and present, a happy World Teachers Day. May it please you.
A pleasant good morning to all who are gathered here this morning and those who are listening us via Von Radio and any other media house that is carrying this morning's proceedings live. I want to join with Minister Liebert in wishing teachers of Nevis and I dare say the Federation a happy World Teachers' Day. Our teachers are at the heart of the recovery efforts as we live through this very trying time of the COVID pandemic. And so I want to thank all teachers for their creativity, for their drive and their dedication at this time as they continue to mold the young, impressionable minds of our children. Mr. President, I stand here this morning and I want to continue to place on record our profound thanks, the administration's profound thanks to the persons who are on the front line at this time. As we continue to fight the COVID pandemic, we in Nevis, we realize that on a daily basis, the numbers are creeping. And I wonder if creeping is the right word. I think we are moving in leap and bounds in the numbers that we are seeing on a daily basis. So I want to say thanks to the teams, Dr. Judy Nisbet at the Health EOC and the task force for the work they have been doing to keep us safe. I want to thank Dr. Rollins, Dr. Florel Hobson, the matron and her staff at the Alexandra Hospital for all they have been doing. Yes, they have put some measures in place, and at times we think that they are a little stringent, but it is all in our safety as we continue to work through this pandemic. However, in as much as the technicians are doing their part, I must appeal to us as a people. We have an individual responsibility to be safe. We have to be safe for ourselves, for our families, especially our seniors and our young children who cannot be vaccinated at this time. And from this rostrum, I want to continue to encourage persons to go out and get vaccinated. It's the most important remedy that we have available to us at this time. I want to add that we ought to continue with the non-pharmaceutical protocols, washing of hands, social distancing, sanitizing, and I want to make an appeal to those persons who have been tested positive to stay at home, stay out of the public domain. I want to speak to those persons who are awaiting their test results. Yes, it is a difficult time to be in quarantine, to be in isolation, to be in lockdown, so to speak, but it behooves all of us to take our responsibility seriously. It must be a collaborative approach. It must be an all-hands-on-deck approach if we are to continue to fight this pandemic and to fight it successfully. All of us must take responsibility. All of us must be on board. Mr. President, I want to speak to the people this morning, or to report on some projects that are under my purview. To date, as it relates to our testing capacity, yes, we have seen the numbers rising, and as such, the labs in St. Kitts and Nevis, all three of them to date, are overwhelmed. And as a matter of urgency, the Nevis administration has sought to develop its own testing capacity in-house. We have already sourced one PCR machine, and I must place on record thanks to the government and people of Japan who would have donated that first machine. And I must say that the government has already made a down payment on a second PCR machine. Today, the machine is on island and it is presently being set up. What we are waiting on presently is a team of experts out of Trinidad who will come and commission the machine. They are expected on island next week, because we have to arrange for them to come in a bubble, and we have to arrange all the necessary protocols for them to come on island and to do their work without any hindrance. After next week, we await the PAHO consultants who will come the following week to conduct training and to officially give the testing machine the certification that is required. And so in as much as I've been hearing the talk out there, oh, we have a machine, it is not a machine that you just plug in and start working. It's a work in progress. Installation, training, and then the final certification before it becomes ready and available. So I am hoping, and based on the date that the technicians have given me, by the 1st of next month, we should have the capabilities of doing in-house testing in Nevis. I want to report, Mr. President, on the project at Alexandra Hospital. It has been a long time in coming, but I want to assure you that once this edifice is completed, it will be something that all of us will be very proud of. I would have said in this house before that it is not an ordinary house we are talking about. It's a technical building, and so it warrants the going over the plans, ensuring that they are done properly. We have been in consultation with the experts from PAHO who are guiding us every step of the way. And so, in as much as it has been a little delayed, it has been delayed for all the good reasons. And the good reasons are that we want to have utility of this facility for the next 50, 60 years. And so we must, I emphasize, get it right now. There is no room for error in building and in commissioning a hospital. That is a very important facility, and we must get it right. And so last week, I'm happy to say that the consultants were on Nevis last week, and they came to ensure that the internal workflow of the hospital is spot on. They have come and they have made the final adjustments, and we are now waiting on the final bit of plan for the internal flow of the workings of the hospital. And this would include not only the layout, but the AC unit, the gas unit. All these moving parts have to be in tandem before they can finalize the final layout of the internal workflow of the hospital. And so I am told that by the middle of this month, both contractors should be back on the job. Mr. President, this is the month of October, and as we highlight Breast Cancer Awareness Month, I want to say that the Ministry of Health and Gender Affairs, and by extension the Nevis Island Administration, we stand in solidarity with all those who are plagued with breast cancer at this time. We also stand in solidarity with the families, because it is not an easy task to be going through something like this. And so we want to bring awareness to those persons out there who have not been doing their checks, to have their checks done on a monthly basis. And this appeal is not only to women, it is an appeal to men as well, because men do come down with breast cancer, even though the numbers are much lower than women. And finally, Mr. President, I want to give a word of encouragement to the parents out there. They have been crying out, and I know this is a very challenging time for all of us, especially in this pandemic. I understand exactly what they are going through. As a parent myself, I know the difficulties of online learning. I know the uncertainty of the school schedules, whether school will be open this week or next week. And I do understand the anxiety that parents have, whether or not there will be a breakout in the school. And so, as I have said before, I stand in solidarity with you because we are all in this together. I ask you, as parents at this time, to dig deep, to be encouraged, to be more attentive, and to put in the necessary time with our children because it is necessary. Now more than ever, the words of being each other's, being your brother's keeper or your sister's keeper, speak volumes. Giving a hand up as opposed to a hand out is important. And let each one of us help one in this very challenging era. With these few words, Mr. President, may it please you.
Mr. President, good morning, and let me say good morning to all who are here gathered today. And with your permission, I rise to make a very brief statement. Just to report very briefly on a few things from my ministry. And I just wanted to change gears a bit and briefly report on the recently concluded Culturama 47, the virtual edition. Of course, we know that we have been living in some very strange and unprecedented times, Mr. President, and we did not have a festival last year, unfortunately. We were all gearing up to have our usual, normal festival this year, but because of the ongoing pandemic, we had to change gear. And we were given the green light to host a shortened, very shortened and curtailed festival. And let me say here, as I always do, thanks to my cabinet colleagues for giving me the green light to continue with this virtual edition of the festival. And so we had a few activities over the Independence Weekend, Mr. President, and I just wanted to report to the public. Of course, we know when we are doing these things, we are spending the public's money, and it is important that we report to the public when these things happen. And so on the 16th of September, which was National Heroes Day, that was a Thursday, we would have hosted what is called Culture Pot, and that was hosted by the Nevis Cultural Development Foundation, the NCDF, and of course it was, as it suggests, it was a melting pot of our culture here on the island of Nevis, and that went down exceptionally well. The reviews were outstanding. On the 17th of September, which was a Friday, we hosted the Soca Monarch competition, and in terms of the winners, in the groovy category, we had Soca Empress making history to become the first female to hold the Soca Monarch title for the groovy segment. First runner-up Delhi Ranks and second runner-up X-Man. In the power category, we had the winner being Easy, and then we had first runner-up X-Man and second runner-up Speedy. Then on Saturday, the 18th of September, we hosted the Calypso Monarch Finals, and that was an intense battle, very competitive, of a very high standard, and we had the winner, history-making night again, when King Hollywood made history to become the first monarch to repeat back-to-back. And I want to congratulate King Hollywood. A lot of other Calypsonians have been trying to do that feat every year, and Hollywood was the first. So congratulations to Hollywood. He reigned for 3 years, actually. And then we had the first run-up, King Dissendat, a veteran, and second run-up, another veteran, King Astro. Then on Friday, Sunday the 19th of September, we had what is called Fashion Expo. That again organized by and executed by the NCDF, and that again was an excellent production. I want here to just say how pleased I am with the activities. I was pleasantly surprised to see how well they were produced and executed. And I must say again, this was a history-making year, because for the very first time, Culturama in its 47 years was hosted not in Charlestown, but in my constituency of St. George, Gingerland, at the David Freeman Center of Excellence. A very proud moment for me and for the people of Nevis, and in particular the people of St. George, Gingerland. It was virtual, but it was Culturama still. It was virtual, but it was Culturama. So I want to congratulate specifically Mr. Antonio Abernathy Lightbird, who was overseeing some of the activities under some stress because he has recently lost his mom, and he did an outstanding job. He, as well as the members of the Culturama Committee and the staff at the Culturama Secretariat, an outstanding job indeed. Let me also congratulate the staff at the NCDF, and in particular, Mr. Kareem L.L. Herbert, who was the production manager for all of the events. And then we had another event on the 20th, Mr. President, and that was hosted by the St. George's Development Committee. I want to commend the St. George's Development Committee as well for hosting that event to expose some of our entrepreneurs in the Gingerland area. Very quickly, Mr. President, I just want to briefly say that we are into Seniors Month. This is a month of October that everything seems to be celebrated in October. A lot of the other months are vacant, but October is packed. And so October is the month where we celebrate our seniors. This past Friday, the 1st of October, was International Day of Older Persons, and this year we are celebrating under the theme, Digital Equity for All Ages. Our activities this year have been very, very curtailed because of course, we know what we are going through, and we know that our seniors, they are one of the most vulnerable groups in our society. And so we have to ensure that they are priority and they are well taken care of. And so we have a scaled-back month. We would have celebrated, we would have gone to church, just the staff this year, at the Eden Brown Church of God on Sunday. Today we have a program called Footprints on Von Radio, this and every Tuesday, where we'll be paying homage to our past persons who have worked in the seniors division and who would have practically blazed the trail for the very successful programs that we have today with our seniors. Tomorrow, the 6th, we have an initiative by the seniors division where they're going to be honoring persons, seniors who would have been a part of our seniors groups and are no longer there. And so they're going to be given an award called the You Are Not Forgotten Award. And so that's for tomorrow and every Wednesday during the month. Then on Thursday the 14th, we have a radio program called Take Me Back. And then on the 29th, Friday, we have a takeaway lunch. And so I just want to say to all of our seniors, we apologize once again for our curtailed activities, but we have you in mind. We are looking out for your best interest. And since I'm talking about our seniors, let me just also say that those of you who have seniors in your care, those of you who are looking after seniors, those of you who have seniors as relatives who are at home, who are a bit frail, who cannot take the vaccine, it is your responsibility. Let me say that again. It is your responsibility to take absolute good care of our seniors, and in particular the seniors in your care. And I want to make a clarion call, as would have been done by the Junior Minister of Health, Honorable Hazel Brandy Williams, that you need to take responsibility and get vaccinated. I want to remind you, those of you who have seniors in your care, and those of you who are caring for seniors in our seniors facilities, that if you take COVID into those facilities, if you take COVID into your home and give it to your senior, and that senior dies, you will have to live with that for the rest of your life. Let me say that again. If you take COVID to any of our seniors and they pass, you will have that cross to bear for the rest of your life. I want you to keep that to the back of your head. And as I'm about to wrap up, Mr. President, I just want to say as well that, just to inform members of the general public, that the Ministry of Sports will very shortly be undertaking a project to have all of our playing fields on the islands lit. It is a project funded by the CDB and the federal government, which we are grateful for. And we will be doing some retrofitting. So all of the lights, all of the playing fields that currently have lights, we will be we'll be doing a retrofit. So we'll be replacing them with LED lights, energy-saving lights, and those that do not have lights, we will also be lighting them up as well. And so I want to crave the indulgence of the general public, because I know some of our fields and our courts are widely utilized. And so we are asking for your indulgence as we embark on this project. When the fields will be retrofit or will be lit, you would not be able to utilize them. And so very shortly we'll be sending out a schedule, and you will know when the particular fields in your area will not be available. We crave your indulgence and your support, and very shortly, very soon, we will have all the fields on the island lit. And as I'm about to wrap up, let me just take this opportunity to wish all of our hardworking teachers a very happy World Teachers' Day. May God continue to bless you all. May it please you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I rise to make some brief comments on the item on the agenda before us, and to say welcome to all who have joined us in the gallery today and also on the various media houses that are transmitting this particular house sitting. Mr. President, I'm pleased to report on a few things that falls under the ministries and department that I'm responsible for. I want to start with the Nevis Housing and Land Development Corporation, and to say that in the last couple of weeks we have had the launch of 2 housing developments in the parish of St. Paul's, which is Nevis 1, and that is the constituency that falls in the responsibility of the member here on my colleague here on this side, and member for Nevis 1. I want to say before I go into the specifics on these 2 housing developments, to give him commendation for his Herculean effort to secure these 2 pieces of lands that we are currently undertaking construction on. I say that because, of course, we are in some very difficult financial times. He would have come to the cabinet and made his case. And I must commend him publicly, because he would have come time and time again, presented his case, made his case, and his case was accepted by the cabinet. So the cabinet would have approved the necessary finances to purchase these 2 tracts of land. And while I'm saying that, I also want to say to him, which I did publicly before, I want to apologize to him, because when we assumed the responsibility and management of the Nevis Housing and Land Development Corporation in 2013, we met a sales and purchase agreement with Dr. Huggins for 7 acres of lands just above the older housing development there at Hamilton. I suppose the plans were to build additional houses, but of course it was a purchase agreement that was long expired, so to speak, because nothing was paid to the gentleman for his 7 acres of land. Of course, if you and I have an agreement, I expect you to fulfill that agreement expeditiously, especially when it comes to lands. But that was consistent with what we met also with another 14 tracts of lands that were acquired by the previous administration. And none of those were ever paid for. Mr. President, if I'm controversial, stop me, but I'm giving you facts, okay? So we had to engage Dr. Huggins, and indeed, it was in excess of $700,000. I will say to you, and I would remind the Nevision public, that when we got into government and we assumed the responsibilities of the NHLDC, the accounts were meager, at least. I will say to you that the only account that had anything substantial was an account, a fixed deposit that is at the Nevis Cooperative Credit Union of 900,000 EC dollars. That's all we met of any substance. What is the point of order about?
Opposite are raising are very controversial at this point and are not fitting for the personal explanations, Mr. President.
Mr. President, at this particular point in time is when ministers report on the ministries. I said I'm coming to you with facts. And these were mentioned in this honorable house many times before. They bear repeating because history is a funny thing, yeah? When history hits you, you sometimes either accept it or you deny it, or it makes you uneasy. Apparently the member opposite is not familiar with the history of this island, so I'm reminding her too, along with the Nevisian public. But as I was saying, the Nevis Cooperative Credit Union account had just about, not just about, exactly 900,000 EC dollars. The only other account that had anything of substance was $26,000 in an account in the National Bank. All of the others were less than that, so I wouldn't even go into those. There were about 10 accounts. We had to close some anyway. Moving right along, Mr. President. So I was apologizing to the member for Nevis 1 because we would have had to sell that tract of land to Nevisians or in lots so as to raise the finances to repay or to pay Dr. Huggins. So that was something we did then that I apologize for member for Nevis 1, but the situation was as it was and we had to stay afloat somehow. Calls were coming. Anyway, thank you. You would have approached the cabinet and we acceded to your request. So we would have purchased lands at Hamilton, just over 3 acres of land, and also at the top of Craddock Road, just over 3.5 acres of land. We would have mentioned the global figure that we would have paid for those lands when we had the launch. I believe it was just over $842,000 up at Hamilton and just over $1 million there at the top of Craddock Road. Now, in terms of what is to be expected in these developments, we had the launch of the development there at the top of Craddock Road on the 9th of September. 21 lots or 22 lots would be in that development, whereby there is going to be a green space. So that means we're going to be building on 21 lots, and one of those lots would be a green space. We have had a tremendous amount of applications. I was told well in excess of 200 applications for 21 lots. So you understand the demand for housing in the constituency of St. Paul's. And we continue to look for additional tracts of lands which are reasonable. We have to keep in mind that these lands still have to be turned around again to our citizens if we were to buy additional lands in Charlestown. Up at Hamilton, we will see construction on 14 lots. 14 lots, and I'm understanding that they are well in excess of 100 applicants up there at Hamilton. So those two developments are ongoing, and of course, we have had approvals from the various financial institutions here on the island, and we want to thank them for working with the NHLDC and of course with the citizens of Nevis, or young men and young women who are aspiring to own a home. And I will say here and now that we speak about home ownership all the time and the importance of it. And I want to stress even further that it is important for our young men and young women to have that a part of their future plans. Let no one at any time dissuade you from owning a piece of the rock to start with. Let no one dissuade you from owning a home to raise your family in an environment that will secure the future of this, our blessed island of Nevis. So those who may come and say home ownership is trivial, I say it is one of the most important investments you will make in your life and the life of your family. So go for it, as they say sometimes locally. Go for it. Mr. President, moving along, we are moving up to Prospect, Cherry Gardens area. That is east of Cherry Garden. We'll start a new development there. It won't be called Cherry Garden. It will have a new, well, an original name. We'll disclose that name soon and very soon. We expect to have just about 16 lots there, and the groundbreaking ceremony will take place on the 21st of October, and then construction will start shortly after. In early November, we're going down to Rice's. So remember, for Nevis 3, we are coming in your neck of the woods in early November. And then in the latter half of November, we are going over to Cedar View in Maddens, where we'll be having a groundbreaking ceremony there also. So we are fulfilling the housing needs to some extent because, like I said, we have more demand than we can supply. But of course, in the meantime, we are seeking out other areas where we can construct affordable housing here on the island of Nevis. Up at University Heights, we continue to construct there as well. We have an additional 2 houses that should start there shortly. So moving along from housing, Mr. President, I want to touch on World Food Day. I want to inform the general public that the Department of Agriculture will be observing World Food Day with some activities throughout the month of October. The activities, or the month of activities, will have the theme, as its theme, or actions or future, better production, better nutrition, a better environment, and a better life. Let me repeat that. The theme would be, our actions are our future. Better production, better nutrition, a better environment, and a better life. I am told that one of the activities will be Minister Jeffers defending his championship belt. Well, however you win, elections were won by default and overturned in the court. But we'll have a cook-off. It will be virtual. So perhaps the members of cabinet need to prepare themselves, because it won't be just myself and the member for Nevis 2 and Premier. You see, it wasn't much of a challenge last time, so I'm looking for additional challenge. So I have told the persons at the persons at the Department of Agriculture, include the entire cabinet. So the entire cabinet will have that. I believe, from what I'm told, it's the 30th of October. So you have your time now to get your chef coat, whatever they call it. Get it into the washing machine, get it white as snow, and come ready to cook, because I'm coming prepared. Mr. President, we also will have additional activities such as a Super Saturday at Cades Bay Farm. We have done some work over there. We have turned that farm into what we consider to be a leisure farm, an attraction for not only locals, but when the tourists start coming back to our islands, it can be an area where they can go and tour the farm and pick some fruits, fresh fruits, and get smoothies and the like. So we'll have a Super Saturday where all day we'll be there with some activities. We'll have farmers market and also an agriculture product sampling event. We'll also have an awards presentation during that month as well. So as the activities get closer, we'll start to do some vigorous promotion of those activities as well. So the general public can listen up for more information regarding the entire month. But the highlight, like I said, would be that cook-off that we're going to have sometime during the month, I believe on the 30th of October, like I said. Moving along, Mr. President, this is an important bit of information that I'll pass along. And I'll say that the Federal Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Marine Resources, along with the Ministry of Agriculture here on Nevis, participated in a virtual launch of the SKN Agriculture Transformation and Growth Strategy for 2022 to 2031. The process was launched on Thursday, 30th September, and the final document would be presented to the public in February of 2022. So essentially, Mr. President, the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Marine Resources has received technical and financial support from the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, to develop a new national strategy plan for the agricultural sector. So this would include both St. Kitts and Nevis. And there is where we were talking about the synergies and making sure we can marry the two islands and have an impact in agriculture that is felt throughout the Federation. Not one side doing one thing and the next doing the other. We are forming a cohesive unit right now so that we can use this opportunity that we've been afforded to grow agriculture to a sustainable level. Now, this long-term plan, Mr. President, will outline a path for the sector to perform and grow strong while achieving its sustainable development goals. However, to achieve this, we have solicited the help of other ministries, stakeholders such as farmers, fisher folks, non-government organizations, and other interested parties, so as to ensure that this is a consultative process and the decisions are made from a holistic perspective. Now, in my presentation at the launch, Mr. President, I did indicate that no developing or developed country has ever achieved significant growth without modernizing its agricultural sector. In addition to driving our economic growth, agriculture also creates jobs, and it is essential to satisfying the nutritional needs of our people. And so, Mr. President, it is important that agriculture be emphasized in this transformation and growth strategy that we are talking about, and also to ensure that the true potential that we know we can achieve through this sector can be achieved. And I will go further and say, Mr. President, all of these small island developing states, all of them would have had agriculture as their foundation, which provided that pivotal role in advancing other sectors in our economies. And so agriculture cannot be underestimated as to the role it can play now and in the future when it comes to the development of these islands, especially our federation. At this point, Mr. President, I'd like to thank Dr. Renata Clark, who is the FAO Sub-Regional Coordinator for the Caribbean region. I also want to thank my Permanent Secretary in St. Kitts, Mr. Ron Dublin Collins, and all of the folks at the Planning and Policy Unit, and all of the members of staff there at the federal level. I also want to thank the Permanent Secretary here in Nevis, Mr. Huey Sargent, because I told him from day one to stay in touch with the Permanent Secretary and St. Kitts. Both of you work together. Both of you lend a helping hand to each other so as to ensure that we provide that type of stability that we are looking for. So I want to commend Mr. Sargent, Huey Sargent that is, for his effort, and also the efforts of all of the folks at the Department of Agriculture who work along with him, and also Mr. Daniel Atherton, who is the FAO local consultant here in the Federation as well, for all of them coming together to ensure we can put this policy document together. Mr. President, I want to move along quickly and say that we continue to work towards import substitution, and of course we have had 2 new shade houses that were commissioned recently to increase production here on the island. Also, we continue in our aggressive pursuit of planting additional fruit trees. Right now on the island, though, we have an availability in large quantities of sweet pepper, watermelon, butternut squash, pumpkin, eggplant, and sweet potato. Now, I want persons to visit our farmers. If they don't have there, then you can come to the Larison Parry Marketing Depot up there at Prospect. We would have what you need there as well. So come and get your products or produce at a reasonable price. Now, the Nevis Fisheries Complex here on Market Street, Mr. President, is currently undergoing some upgrade. And this is as a result of some equipment we would have received from both the Japanese government and the FAO Climate Change Adaptation in the Eastern Caribbean Fisheries Sector C4 Fish program. The ministry, along with the Public Works Department, have assisted with the works there at the complex. And actually, the global figure that has been spent so far is just about 73,000 EC dollars. What was done is an upgrade in the facilities there to accommodate all of these pieces of equipment that we expect to receive and have received some already. But we expect to receive a band saw, 2 fillet machines, 1 ice machine, 1 fish mincing machine, a vacuum seal pack, 1 fish smoke machine, and also 2 freezers. So that's a serious injection into that particular facility that we feel will all goes well to the benefit of the complex and, most importantly, to the fisher folks who ply their trade and sell their products to that facility. So I want to continue to encourage the general public to support the fisheries complex there on Market Street. I see good things in the making. They have a new executive in place, and I believe the fisher folks here on the island of Nevis will be pleased that this administration continue to invest in their future and invest in them so that they can make that industry a sustainable one as well. Mr. President, with those few words, I want to thank you for your time and for, well, allowing me to impart this knowledge and information, and may it please you.
Point out something, please, for the edification of members of Parliament. Point of order could only be put on a debate. That is, when you are debating something in the House. It cannot be put on a statement by ministers. If a minister is making a statement based on his or her ministry, there is no point of order on that. He is making a statement, providing, as if the chair feels that he has gone too far, the chair can intercede. Other than that, he makes his statement unperturbed. Thank you.
Personal explanations. Introduction of bills and first readings.
Good morning, Mr. President. I rise to have introduced and read the first time the Nevis International Banking Bill 2021.
Mr. President, I rise to second the motion.
The question is that the bill shortly entitled the Nevis International Banking Bill be read the first time. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill to repeal and replace the Nevis International Banking Ordinance Cap 7.05 and to enable international banking to be carried on by international banks from within Nevis, to provide for the regulation of international banks, to encourage the development of Nevis as a responsible international financial center, and to provide for matters incidental thereto or connected therewith.
The bill has been read the first time.
Mr. President, I rise to seek leave to introduce and have read first time the bill shortly entitled the Nevis Physical Planning and Development Control Amendment Bill 2021.
Mr. President, I rise to second the motion.
Question is that the bill shortly entitled the Nevis Physical Planning and Development Control Amendment Bill be read the first time. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The The ayes have it.
A bill to amend the Nevis Physical Planning and Development Control Ordinance, Chapter 6.09, and for matters related thereto or connected therewith.
The bill has been read the first time.
Mr. President, I rise and seek leave to introduce and have read a first time the bill shortly entitled the Nevis Contractors Registration and Regulation Bill 2021.
Mr. President, I rise to second the motion and reserve the right to speak on the bill.
The question is that the bill shortly entitled the Nevis Contractors Registration and Regulations Ordinance be read the first time. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill to provide for the establishment of a construction commissioner, the registration and regulation of contractors, and for related or incidental matters.
The bill has been read the first time.
Public business, bills, second and third readings.
Mr. President, I rise to move the second reading and debate on the bill shortly entitled the Nevis International Insurance Amendment Bill 2021. Mr. President, I believe that the members of the House and the public would know that the island of Nevis has since 1984 engaged itself services business. At the time, the government of the day, headed by our national hero, Sir Simeon Daniel, would have introduced legislation which authorized the incorporation of certain companies here, and that was the Nevis Business Corporation Ordinance. What happened then, Mr. President, is that the government of the day granted a 10-year monopoly to a single company, Morningstar Holdings. And that monopoly progressed for those 10 years and allowed the industry to develop in a particular way. It will be for history to judge whether that decision to grant a monopoly was a good one or a bad one. It was not until 1994, at the end of that monopoly, and with the advent of a new administration, headed as it was then by the Honorable Vance Emery, that Nevis sought to diversify the products that it offered to the financial services marketplace. And so, in short order, we saw the development of legislation permitting limited liability companies, LLCs, legislation permitting trusts, international trusts, legislation permitting foundations, legislation permitting international banks, legislation permitting international insurance business. And so, whereas we had a single product for just about a decade, from 1984 until 1994, the sector has progressed in leaps and bounds in offering a series of other products to complement the Nevis Business Corporation Ordinance. I believe, Mr. President, there is no need for me to recite the tremendous contribution that this sector has made and continues to make to the island of Nevis and to the economic fortunes of our beloved island and country. It, however, Mr. President, has to be said that this is a sector which continues to be under pressure globally. As I speak to you, Just, I believe it was a day or two ago, we have a group of journalists who have now published something they refer to as the Pandora Papers. Prior to that, we had the Panama Papers. We've had something called the Paradise Papers, I think it's called. And what we see now is this Pandora Papers, which they say is the largest single cache of data that has come, they say, from some 14 jurisdictions, many of which are in the Caribbean. I have heard mentioned thus far Belize, or the Bahamas, or the British Virgin Islands, and I have no doubt that little Nevis at some point will be mentioned as well. Mr. President, I think that these things, as a backdrop to the debate today, have to be taken in their proper context and perspective. One of my ongoing concerns is that there are some who have arrogated unto themselves the right to regulate the rest of the world, and some who have, whether it's a personal or political agenda, to seek to drive those of us who have sought to make a living in this world out of business. What I find is instructive in the early reports on these Pandora Papers is that the data, just like the Panama Papers and the Paradise Papers, is stolen data. Let me say that again, Mr. President. The data is stolen data. Put differently, somebody hacked somebody's system and got this treasure trove of information. None of the reporting that we have seen thus far speaks to the illegality of what is taking place. And that illegality to which I speak is the illegal harvesting of people's confidential information. Whether they hack trust companies, banks, or whoever they hacked, they have all this information, and it appears that some crime, in this case cybercrime, is permissible when it suits the agenda of those who are seeking to perpetrate and promulgate a particular perception of our countries. What I also find is instructive, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'm double vaxxed and COVID negative as of this morning, so can I take my mask off? Thank you, sir. Mr. President, what I also find is instructive is that there has not been one single allegation thus far of any criminality or wrongdoing. Perhaps that will come, but in the early reporting, there has not been a single allegation that anyone has committed a crime by using a financial services destination for his or her planning. And so we hear, for example, that Tony Blair, former Prime Minister of the UK, that he and his wife avoided stamp duty on buying a building in London. Well, what is wrong with that? From time immemorial, man has been entitled to order his affairs in such a way as to reduce his tax liability. They did not say he evaded taxes, because that would be a criminal matter. And that example, I cherry-picked that example. You know why, Mr. President? Here's what Tony Blair and his wife, Sherry Booth QC, did. They wanted to buy a building in London. The building was owned by a corporation registered offshore. And so instead of having a transfer of the title from that corporation to them, they simply bought the corporation offshore. So the building continued to be owned by the corporation. And they bought the corporation. In fact, I'm reminded, you know, Mr. President, that there was a transaction here in Nevis that was similar. An entire estate here, a large estate, was owned by a Panamanian company. And when those people came to buy that estate, they decided, instead of having the Panamanian company transfer the property to them and incur transfer tax, they bought the company in Panama and therefore paid no transfer tax. I recall a government differently constituted kicked and screamed, but nothing illegal had been done. And let me just say I did not advise on that transaction. So, Mr. President, there is absolutely nothing wrong, but there appears to be an agenda where people say that they are morally or otherwise opposed to these jurisdictions, and therefore in some attempt at international name and shame, I don't know what you're being shamed for, because if Rams has corned beef for $5, and you decide to go to Best Buy where they have it for $3.50, I don't know why you should be named and shamed. If you have the opportunity to set up business in a jurisdiction that offers you a low tax burden, I don't know why there should be name and shame. My view is that countries are entitled to set up their tax system to suit their purposes. Those of us here in St. Kitts and Nevis will find a tax rate of 40% and 50% offensive. And I say it candidly, we have not had personal income tax in our country for several decades. What would happen? And I want the public to understand and to reflect. If tomorrow, Mr. President, we were to say that from every dollar you earn, you have to pay 50 cents in tax, would that mean you're only working for 50 cents? Because from every dollar, 50 cents has to come back. Now, there are some who seem to feel that because that is their model, that it should also be our model. And that is where I think there's a need for CARICOM and for regional blocs such as CELAC to get together and to jointly fight these attempts to impose on the rest of the world standards that are set, whether they're set in Brussels, London, or wherever they're set. I believe, Mr. President, and I think that I stand on good authority, that if sovereignty means anything, it has to be that countries are entitled to set their tax policy, not to do harm to others, but to further the developmental agenda of those countries. St. Kitts and Nevis could never dictate to France that their tax rate is too high. We could never say to President Biden that he taxes Americans too highly. Of course not. So why then should they be able to say to us that we tax our people too low? And will our people respond if the government tomorrow were to say, you know what, we're going to be like France and charge you 50% of what you earn? I am sure there'll be riots in the streets if we were to suggest any such measure. So, Mr. President, I believe it's important that our people understand the hostility that we are facing. It is one thing to say that activity here is unlawful, that activity here is illegal. Clearly, none of us support illegality or unlawful behavior. It is a wholly different matter for them to say the activity is not unlawful, the activity is not illegal, but somebody somewhere finds it somehow immoral because people are allowed to order their affairs in such a way as to reduce taxes. So Mr. Blair and his wife saved, I believe, just over £300,000 in stamp duty. They have done nothing wrong. But I suppose because he's a public figure, the idea behind this level of journalism now is to seek to use his actions to tarnish his image and to say somehow that he ought to have volunteered to pay tax when he had a perfectly legal mechanism open to him to avoid the payment of that tax. I use that as a backdrop, Mr. President, to speak to the Nevis International Insurance Amendment Bill 2021, which we currently have before us. Because as I set out the history, brief as it was, of the financial services sector on the island of Nevis, going back to 1984, and the strides that we would have made and the products that we have added since then, one of those products was international insurance. And I would want, Mr. President, the House, the opposition, the public, to understand that this government is a responsible government. And what we have sought to do on every occasion is to learn from best practices as they develop, to consult with the industry from time to time, to hear from organizations such as STEP, Society of Trust and Estate Practitioners, I think they're called, and to speak to the experts. And so from time to time, Mr. President, we will come to introduce new legislation to repeal and replace. You would have had this morning the first reading of the International Banking Ordinance, which is intended to repeal and replace, and, Mr. President, to amend as necessary legislation as the demands of the market, the demands of the industry, and as changes and best practices develop, we will come from time to time. Now, the legislation that we seek to amend is the Nevis International Insurance Ordinance, Chapter 7.07, Nevis. And that was revised as of 31st December 2009. It came into force back in 2004. Now, I want to make it clear, Mr. President, that we are seeking only to amend, not to repeal and replace. And so if I can move then to the actual bill that is before the House this morning. And that bill, entitled as it is, the Nevis International Insurance Amendment Bill 2021, seeks to make some amendments that flow from consultations and concerns that we have had from the industry here on Nevis, and from best practices that we have seen being developed elsewhere. One of the things that it seeks to do, which, Mr. President, is novel in terms of some of us accepting the new realities and the new norms, and that is to remove the minister from the role, the integral role that he hitherto played in the context of this legislation. And so you find that the ordinance that would have been enacted back in 2004 and subsequently amended gave certain powers to the minister. People must report to the minister. The minister must do this. The minister must approve securities, etc. The new thinking is that you need to keep the politicians out of these things and allow the experts. Some of us, when we become politicians, you know, Mr. President, we become experts in everything. But the truth be told, most of us have very limited expertise, sometimes only in the areas in which we are trained. And some may argue that even in the areas in which we are trained, the expertise is lacking in some of us. So, the thinking, the modern thinking, is that you remove the politicians who can sometimes be moved by political considerations rather than what is best for the industry, and you put some of those decision-making powers in the hands of the technocrats. And as I said, Mr. President, it's a bold step. Which politician, which minister wants to come to the House with legislation to say, you're taking away authority from me and giving it to a technocrat? And so the technocrat, no, will decide, and I don't have a say. But those are the new best practices, and what applied in days of old is not necessarily what is accepted today. And as I said, as a responsible jurisdiction, the island of Nevis and this government that I'm privileged to lead at this point in our history will continue to make the changes as necessary to ensure that we stay abreast of and even out ahead of some of the changes that are required. Now, the Nevis International Insurance Ordinance is the principal legislation, as I've said, and that is used for the licensing and regulating of international insurance business. The legislation initially was passed in 2004, and it has over the years seen various amendments to its provisions that sought to respond to new and emerging risks and new norms and trends in the international insurance sector. Over the past 5 years, the Financial Services Regulatory Commission, the Nevis branch, and just so I explain for the public, Mr. President, there is a federal body called the Financial Services Regulatory Commission, and that federal body operates on both islands. In the context of Nevis, it has what is referred to as a Nevis branch. And that is the branch that, in essence, supervises and regulates what happens in Nevis in this sector. Over the past 5 years, and this is important information, Mr. President, the Nevis Financial Services Regulatory Commission, or let me use proper language, forgive me, the Financial Services Regulatory Commission Nevis branch has licensed and incorporated 91 international insurance companies, including 74 captives, 1 allied reinsurer, 9 reinsurers, 4 general insurance companies, 1 long-term insurer, and 2 insurance brokers. As at the 30th of September 2021, Nevis had a total number of 183 active international insurance entities on its register. This included 136 captives, 20 reinsurers, 15 allied reinsurers, 6 general insurance companies, 3 long-term insurers, and 3 insurance brokers. The sector continues to evolve, and new amendments to the ordinance are again proposed, as we do today, to enhance the principal ordinance and to make the administration of it more beneficial to its users. The amendments were assessed in accordance with international standards and best practices and are comparable, Mr. President, to similar legislation in jurisdictions within the region and in jurisdictions that offer similar products and similar services to the island of Nevis. If I can then move quickly to the legislation itself. The legislation, Mr. President, you will see at Section 3 seeks, as I mentioned earlier, to make some changes by deleting the word minister from a number of different provisions of the principal ordinance. And so Section 2 of the ordinance is amended by deleting the word minister that appears in the definition of approved securities and replacing it with the word registrar. What used to apply is that if insurance companies wanted to invest or to deal with certain approved securities, that approval had to come from the minister. Remember I said, Mr. President, that most ministers may not be trained or have any technical expertise in the area that they call upon to administer. And so what this seeks to do is to put that authority now in the hands of the registrar. The same follows. Section 3B says that by deleting the word minister as it appears in the definition of auditor and replacing it with the word registrar. Again, it used to be that auditors had to be approved by the minister. We're saying no. Take the minister out of that and allow the registrar, who is a technical expert, to deal with such matters. We have in Section C, 3C, delete the definition of insurance broker and replace it with a new definition. And that definition is outlined there, Mr. President. We have at subsection D inserted a new definition after the definition of regulations. And what have we done here? We've introduced now the concept of a regulator, not a new regulator. So we're not talking about a regulator specific to insurance, but we're introducing a regulator, the concept of a regulator, into the insurance legislation that will allow oversight by that person who has already been appointed as the regulator of financial services appointed for Nevis under the Financial Services Regulatory Commission Act. And, Mr. President, if you're following along, and especially for my colleagues and the member opposite, you realize I am speaking to what is not here. You may find that strange. But when we come to committee stage, we will propose an amendment. So I'm already speaking to the amendment, which I hope will get the approval of members, because that amendment will make it clear that the regulator that we're speaking about is not a new office, but rather we are allowing the existing regulator appointed under the Nevis Financial Services Regulatory, under the Financial Services Regulatory Commission Act, that regulator appointed for Nevis to have some oversight of the insurance sector. We go on, and what you would realize at E, we have done some cleaning up. But if we go to section 4, Mr. President, we see more of what I have been saying. That in section 4, it again is telling you that subsection 3, subsection 12 of the ordinance is amended by deleting the word minister as it appears in the second line and replacing it with the word regulator. So essentially what we're doing, we've introduced now into the international insurance framework, legislative framework, a role for the regulator of financial services appointed for Nevis, and we are systematically removing the minister from the day-to-day scheme of things and replacing the minister either with the regulator or alternatively with the registrar where appropriate. And you'll see that throughout the legislation, Mr. President. Again, we amend section 4. At section 5 of this bill under debate, we say that section 4, subsection 1 and paragraph C of the ordinance is amended by deleting the word minister as it appears in the first line and replacing it with the word regulator. We then move on and we see at section 6 that we are amending section 5 of the principal ordinance by inserting the words advisory committee immediately after the word insurance in the heading. And here, importantly, Mr. President, in subsection 1 by again deleting the word minister and replacing it with the words Financial Services Regulatory Commission, Nevis branch. And following, in subsection 6 by deleting the word minister and replacing it with the words Financial Services Regulatory Commission, Nevis branch. And I have the parent legislation in front of me, Mr. President, so that I can be followed quite clearly. Essentially, subsection 1 says, there shall be established a committee called Insurance Advisory Committee to investigate, report to, and advise the minister on matters connected with the development and regulation of international insurance in Nevis. What this amendment is seeking to do is to say not anymore that there shall now be established a committee called Insurance Advisory Committee to investigate, report, and to advise the Financial Services Regulatory Commission, Nevis branch. See the substantive change, Mr. President? That is what we're seeking to do. To let the experts handle their business and take the politicians out of it because they may not always have the requisite expertise. This is a government that recognizes that we must allow the technicians, those schooled, experienced, well-versed in various areas, Mr. President, consistent with what is now considered best practice to do their job and to advise us rather than the other way around of us seeking to advise them as to how to function. We move on, and we have made, again, some minor changes and adjustments. Section 7 and Section 8, these are minor amendments where we are cleaning up the legislation and making changes where necessary to words or to sections. So nothing there that is particularly dramatic. At Section 9, we have introduced something which is fundamental, and that is an amendment to Section 18 of the Principal Ordinance. The current legislation, that is the parent legislation, does not explicitly specify the format in which annual accounts must be submitted. For years, the standard for submission of annual accounts to the registrar has been via original hard copy format. More recently, there's been the acceptance of a few electronic forms without demanding the subsequent hard copy filings. The International Association of Insurance Supervisors International Core Principles only requires that the insurer makes reliable and transparent reports to the supervisor. Therefore, this proposed amendment is in line with global standards and with other jurisdictions in our region that already allow for the submission of annual accounts to be submitted electronically through email or uploaded to a secured server for appropriate access. The amendment also includes requirements to pay new prescribed fees relating to late filing of the annual accounts and for filing of annual account extension and waiver requests. The new fees were passed on the 16th of February 2021 and took effect as of the 1st of July 2021. Mr. President, all that this is doing is really moving Nevis into the modern age. We say Nevis naturally, and we feel that it ought to be reflected in all that we do, that we are consistently concerned about the environment. And so we are slowly moving to a situation where we are no longer using paper. And this voluminous sheets of paper that clearly damage the environment, because we get paper from cutting down trees, that we are doing away with that. And with the world moving in the direction that it is moving, with everybody now on a device, the reality is, Mr. President, that Nevis is simply doing what is required to modernize the approach. And so it's going to be the same accounts, the same requirement and standard for reporting, but rather than insisting that people bring in voluminous documents physically to place with the registrar, they can now do so electronically. And I believe that's a giant leap forward, Mr. President, and a step that ought to be applauded. Mr. President, we look at also the changes, as I've indicated, as they relate to filing. And if you were to have a look with me at Section 9C of the proposed amendment to Section 18 of the Principal Ordinance, you will see where it says that we're deleting again the word minister, replacing it with registrar. I don't need to keep going over that. That is clear, the point that we are seeking to achieve and the policy that we're serving. And then it says we're inserting immediately after subsection 5 a new subsection 6 as follows, and I quote, where the audited annual accounts are submitted by a registered insurer later than 6 months after the close of the financial year to which they relate, then a late fee as prescribed shall be payable. And we have inserted immediately after the new subsection 6 and new subsection 7. A registered insurer, prior to the expiration of the initial deadline for submission of its annual accounts, may apply to the registrar to request an extension for submission of its annual accounts after the due date for submission of the annual accounts, and this application shall be accompanied by the prescribed application fee. Put differently, there are now time limits to get things done, and if you are late, you pay a late fee. We're accustomed to that. If you're late even with your taxes, you have to pay some fees and penalties. But we are saying to the industry that if you anticipate that you will be late, you can apply for an extension. And so we continue to be user-friendly and continue to work with the industry in this regard. Again, Section 10 and 11 do not do much. They simply, again, make corrections in terms of sections that are quoted to the Principal Ordinance. Section 12, Mr. President, seeks to amend Section 26. And that is important because we are inserting a new subsection, and that new subsection is saying a registered insurer who is authorized to carry on captive insurance business may engage in co-insurance pools, and an insurer engaged in any co-insurance pool will be regulated in accordance with the provisions of this ordinance. And again, technical language perhaps, but what it is doing is expanding the range of activities for captives. And as we have already learned, Mr. President, we have registered with us 136 captives. We again have some amendments, Section 13, minor amendments. And then, Mr. President, we have Section 14. Section 14 is also an important new provision. Why? Because Section 14 amends the principal ordinance to allow for the first time a corporate director of a registered insurer. And again, fancy language perhaps, it just means that a company can now act as a director. Not in isolation, let me make that clear. It simply now provides that a registered insurer may have a corporate director or a company as one of its directors, and that company must be part of a board of directors in addition to 2 directors who are natural persons. Natural persons, Mr. President, simply means you and I. And corporate director simply means a company, which by law is considered a person, but not a natural person. So, this now allows for a registered insurer to have a corporate entity as part of its board. And so the board for a registered insurer can now be Mr. President, Mr. Brantley, and Brantley Limited. That's all. And again, that is considered by the industry to be a step forward. Mr. President, of importance, we provide at 14B, a new subsection 4, that any registered insurer who has directors in contravention of the section commits an offense and shall be subject to a fine of $20,000 imposed by the Financial Services Regulatory Commission. I suspect it means Nevis branch. So we will have to add that at the committee stage. Mr. President, if I can move quickly. Again, Section 36 makes minor amendments, just minor corrections. And Section 38, we are told of the principal legislation, deletes the word minister as it appears. Let me look quickly at that, Mr. President. Section 38 of the principal legislation deletes the word minister as it appears in the 3rd line. And that is in relation to the preservation of secrecy and confidentiality. That there was a duty on the minister. Well, they've taken the minister out of the loop now. I'm assuming from the drafters, because the minister is no longer in the thick of things, that arguably he won't have confidential information. And so he's been taken out. And that is the wisdom of the drafts people. And so that is why we are here. Section 39, again, makes some significant changes. And I'll take just a moment to speak to Section 39. That is, forgive me, Mr. President, Section 17 of the legislation that we're debating makes an amendment to Section 39 of the principal legislation. Section 39 is amended by deleting the section in its entirety and replacing it with a new section. And all really this deals with is the question of winding up. How do you wind up compulsory winding up of a registered insurer? And it provides that the court may order the compulsory winding up of a registered insurer under this ordinance, A, on the petition of the registrar, B, in the case of a registered insurer engaged in general business, on the petition of policyholders with an aggregate annual premium of at least $200,000. 2, a petition for the compulsory winding up of a registered insurer may not be presented without leave of the court, which must be satisfied that a prima facie case has been established in the following circumstances. A, on the petition of the registrar of the registered insurer being unable to pay its debts within the meaning of subsection 4. B, on the petition of a policyholder of the registered insurer failing to pay a substantial claim that is uncontested or awarded by a court or other tribunal of competent jurisdiction, and as to which all rights of appeal have been waived or have elapsed through the passage of time. So, simply put, if the registrar of insurance petitions the court for winding up of a registered insurer, the court has to be satisfied that a prima facie case has been established that that registered insurer is unable to pay its debts. If the petition is presented by a policyholder, the court has to be satisfied on a prima facie case that the registered insurer has failed to pay a claim that is uncontested or has been awarded by a court or other tribunal of competent jurisdiction, and all rights of appeal have either been waived or have expired. Basically, the insurer owes the policyholder money and has not paid. And the policyholder, therefore, can go to the court and say, I want this entity wound up. And winding up sounds like a sophisticated language, you know, Mr. President. It doesn't mean like when you wind up, like I like to wind up the opposition. It doesn't mean that. It means that you are bringing the life of the company to an end. You are saying to the court to order the company's life to come to an end and to put in place certain distribution of the company's assets. So when a company doesn't pay its debts or cannot pay its debts, that's a classic case, Mr. President, of where somebody can present to the court a winding up petition. Put differently, put this company out of its misery. It's not functioning properly, it cannot pay its debts, and therefore allow it to come to an end. And that is an important protection, Mr. President, to prevent companies from abusing individuals. Because imagine if a company has been collecting your premiums all along, and then when it comes time to pay, they tell you they cannot afford to pay. Well, certainly there has to be some recourse. And the recourse is to say to this company, since you're not operating properly, let us put you out of your misery. And that is why the court is there. And the court can compulsorily, that word is important. It means that this is not the company volunteering to end its life through some voluntary winding up, but rather some individual suing in the court for that entity to be wound up. And here we have the provision saying that it can either be the registrar who comes forward or it can be a policyholder. At section 3, 17.3, the registrar shall be a party to any winding up proceedings under this section and shall be provided with such information as may be required concerning the affairs of the registered insurer. Put differently, if even the winding up petition is brought by a policyholder, the framers of the legislation are saying that the registrar of international insurance must be a party. And that's important because that ensures that the registrar always has oversight of what is happening in relation to regulated entities such as registered insurers. It continues at paragraph 4. For the purposes of this ordinance, a registered insurer shall be deemed to be unable to pay its debts if at any time the total value of its assets does not exceed the total amount of its liabilities by the amount prescribed by this ordinance or its regulations. I believe all of us can understand that. If your debt's more than your assets, but not just if they're more, but if they're more within a prescribed range that is provided by the regulations, then you are deemed to be unable to pay your debts. At 5, in any proceedings upon a petition presented by the registrar for the compulsory winding up of a registered insurer under this section, evidence that the registered insurer was unable to pay its debts at any time before the start of the proceedings is evidence that such registered insurer continues to be unable to pay its debts unless the contrary is proved. What is that saying in simple language? If I bring the petition today, the 5th of October, and the matter comes up in the court on the 5th of November, and during that time, the registered insurer has put themselves in a better financial place than they were when the petition was presented, that they will still be presumed to be unable to pay their debts because they were unable to pay their debts on the 5th of October when I brought the petition. But if the contrary can be shown or proved. What that means is it is the balance of burden of proof shifts now onto the insurance, registered insurer, to show whatever my position might have been on the 5th of October, I am now able to pay my debts, and therefore I ought not to be wound up. That will be a matter for the lawyers, Mr. President, but that is the change that is being brought into being. We are also at Section 8 inserting a new Section 39A. And we are amending the principal ordinance by inserting immediately after Section 39 a new Section 39A as follows. And this is a new section. Petition by the registrar. If the registrar is of the opinion that it is necessary to do so, it may, with the leave of the court, so it cannot just do it willy-nilly, with the leave of the court, present a petition for the compulsory winding up by the court of the registered insurer on the ground that it is unable to pay its debts. We have dealt with that. Or B, for an order that the registered insurer or any part of the insurance business of the registered insurer be placed under judicial management on the ground that it is in the public interest to do so. So, what this is simply saying, Mr. President, is that there may be situations where a registered insurer is able to pay its debts based on the formula set out in the legislation. But they may be conducting their business or some part of their business in a way that is inimical, harmful to the public interest. And this is giving the registrar the authority to move the court to say, court, please appoint a judicial manager to deal with such aspects of the business that is contrary to the public interest. And this therefore widens the scope of the registrar to act, and does not limit the registrar therefore only to the situation where the insurer is unable to pay its debts. So I can anticipate, Mr. President, that an insurer is conducting some business in a reckless way, that an insurer may be paying out its claims but delaying for an inordinate period before it pays. It is not bankrupt, it is not unable to pay its debts, but it may have a policy that it will make you wait for a year or two before it pays you. And the registrar may well look at that and say, but that is not in the public interest. And I will go to court and have the court deal with that by appointing a judicial manager over the entire phase of the registered insurer or over some part of the business that is inimical or harmful to the public interest. We also have at Section 19 the insertion of a new section. The ordinance is amended by inserting immediately after the new Section 39A a new 39B as follows. Petition by a registered insurer. This is the insurance company itself now. A licensed insurer may, upon giving the registrar 1 month's written notice of its intention to do so, petition the court without leave for an order to be voluntarily wound up. See the difference now, Mr. President? We have dealt with compulsory winding up. Compulsory is when you take the insurer kicking and screaming. They don't want to be wound up. We are now, however, saying that if an insurance company and those who manage it decide, listen, we're done with this. Business isn't good. We're no longer interested, whatever the situation may be, that they can, upon giving 1 month's written notice to the registrar, they can move the court for a voluntary. So if the compulsory is an involuntary death sentence for the company, this one, you go to your death voluntarily. So you end the life of the entity voluntarily. And then we go on with some important protections to say that both the registered insurer and the registrar are entitled to be heard on any petition presented to the court under this section. You see, we continue to preserve, Mr. President, the right of the registrar to know what is going on in the insurance sector. So we have earlier said that the registrar has to be a party to any winding up proceedings, And we are now making it clear that even where the winding up proceeding is voluntary, that the registrar has a right to be present and to be heard. We go on. Where a registered insurer, except a registered insurer which carries on long-term business, has passed a resolution for the voluntary winding up of its business, it shall notify the registrar in writing of such resolution and of the date on which it will cease to enter into new contracts of insurance and of the name and address of its proposed liquidator. So again, very clear on its face. I don't think any explanation is necessary. We go on, I think, at section 20 to a very important provision. The ordinance is amended by inserting immediately after the new section 39B a new section 39C as follows. Stay of legal process. Where a petition is presented under this part for an order in respect of a registered insurer, all actions and the execution of all writs, summonses, and other processes against that registered insurer are by virtue of this section stayed and may not be proceeded with without the leave of the court. Now, why would you think that important, Mr. President? That's important because there may be actions that are independent of the winding up proceedings that have been ongoing. And so all that this is saying is that, listen, once a winding up proceeding is presented, all of those actions must be stayed. They put a hold on everything. So that the court dealing with the winding up proceedings has complete and untrammeled discretion to deal with the winding up proceedings without, for example, another court saying something contrary or some other court saying, but this judgment has to be imposed. And why is that important? It's important, Mr. President, because sometimes, let us say you have a judgment in your favor against the insurance company. And that insurance company is unable to pay its debts. It means that it doesn't just owe you, it owes other people. In a winding up, the judge dealing with that winding up and the appointment of any liquidator or judicial manager, as the case may be, has the capacity to say, listen, you only have $1 million in the insurance company, but it owes $5 million. Well, Mark Brantley has a judgment for $2 million. Well, if you take the full $1 million and pay it to Mark Brantley, what happens to the others? They are left out altogether. So what this basically says is, as is customary, that in the winding up proceedings, you stay all of these judgments, you stay all of these proceedings, and then the liquidator might well be able to say, when I gather in all the assets of the insurance company, and I can only come up with $1 million, but I have $5 million worth of debts. Well, guess what? Everybody gets, my math isn't the best, but everybody gets, what that look like, 20 cents on the dollar? Well, anyway, they get a piece, not all. And that is what I believe lawyers refer to it as pari passu distribution. So you get something based on the amount that you're owed. So somebody who's owed $2 million may get, nobody's helping me, but they get a portion. They get something. And somebody who's owed $500,000 gets something. And somebody who's owed $200,000 gets something. But no one person will get everything. And so that is all that we're seeking to do, to maintain the process of fairness. We go on at 21, same deleting the minister. 22, deleting the minister. 23, deleting the minister. I wonder if there'll be anything on me left after this ordinance, Mr. President, because we're deleting straight. 24, delete the minister from the schedule. And then we just make again, some minor amendments in 24. Forgive me, Mr. President. Mr. President, same thing at D and E, and that would, I believe, bring me to the end of the proposed amendments that are contained within the Nevis International Insurance Amendment Bill 2021. As I close off, therefore, my presentation, Mr. President, let me simply reassert and reaffirm that as a responsible government, we will continue to listen, We will continue to seek to ensure that our jurisdiction has available to it the best legislation and that we continue to keep pace with the industry regionally and internationally. And that is why we're here, and we would hope that all the members of the House would support this very important initiative as we continue, Mr. President, to build on this important pillar of our economy, which is the financial services sector, and the subset of that sector, which is the Nevis international insurance sector. May it please you, Mr. President.
No. It's all right. I was trying to help the minister. I was getting your attention to help the minister with her. Which is all right.
Mr. President, I rise in support of this bill, and I support the mover of this bill shortly entitled the Nevis International Insurance Amendment Bill 2021. The Premier and mover of the bill gave a historic overview of how the financial services sector started. He made mention of the shakers and movers of this industry. And I too would want to pay homage to the Honorable Simeon Daniel of blessed memory for his brilliance and his foresight for leading Nevis into the service industry, first by way of tourism and then by the way of financial services. And I would like to say as well, I'll pay homage as well to the Honorable Vance Amory, who continued the process which has landed us here today. They have built such a foundation that it behooves us who have now come behind to build on that very strong foundation which they have built. And so it is important that from time to time we come to make amendments to the bill so that we can stay on the cutting edge of doing business in Nevis. This particular legislation, Mr. Premier, was passed, Mr. President, was passed in 2004, some 17 years ago. And like everything else, we must come from time to time to tweak the bill to make it more realistic and to make it more user-friendly if we are to stay competitive in this very important industry. And so the Premier would have spoken at length and would have gone through the necessary amendments which have been put forward here today. I want to look at the amendments, Mr. President, as one. We are responding to the inherent risk of the international markets. And again, I bring your attention to the Premier's preamble. He spoke at length with the many challenges we are faced today from the G7 groups who are trying in every effort to sort of suppress the business that we have here in the region and more particular in Nevis. He spoke about how one thing is good for them, but it's different for us. And so if we are to stay on the cutting edge and if we are to continue to make our products appealing, we must sort of fall in line so that we can stay competitive. And so we respond to the inherent risks that are faced internationally. We also look at the ease of doing business. In many jurisdictions, there are work done to make their jurisdictions a one-stop shop. And so we too have to fall in line. We also look, Mr. President, at the importance of the financial services sector to the economy of Nevis. Presently, the revenue from financial services accounts for some 12% of our annual revenue. And so if we are to continue to earn from this very important industry, we must make our legislation competitive so that we continue to attract persons to our shores. There are as the Premier pointed out, Mr. President, there are some of the amendments that are very technical in nature, but we have the explanations so that persons could understand what we are trying to accomplish in making these few amendments. And so, for example, Section 21, which speaks to let me add, Mr. President, that some of the amendments is mere cosmetics, especially in the areas where we are just changing a word or two. For example, changing wherever there is the word of minister, we replace that with the regulator. So those are mere cosmetics. However, the most important parts of this amendment speaks to the winding up of one's insurance company. That is very important, as the Premier would have outlined earlier. Another very important amendment, Mr. President, is to add a corporate director, which would help to oversee the entire runnings of this not new, but this legislation, amended legislation. And so, Mr. President, what I would want to say this morning in my very brief addition to what the Premier would have said is that it is important that we make our legislations airtight so that we can stand up to any scrutiny internationally. We want to make it user-friendly so that we form part of the competitive landscape of the region and of all the other jurisdictions who have made financial services one of their main industry. We continue to play an integral part in our revenue intake on an annual basis. And so we would want to ensure that the amendments made to our legislation is in tandem with international standards. We would want to ensure that they are user-friendly to our international persons who are thinking of opening their insurance businesses here on Nevis. And most importantly, Mr. President, we want to ensure that financial services continues to grow in leaps and bounds in Nevis so that our economy can remain the robust economy that it is today. With these brief remarks, Mr. Premier, I would like to wish this, Mr. President, I keep calling you Mr. President, I wonder, I'm so happy. For your job. Mr. President, with these brief remarks, I want to wish this bill safe passage through this honorable House.
Mr. President, it appears that there are no other contributions, and I believe that's a good thing. It means that the entire House is in agreement that what we're doing here is worthwhile, reasonable, and necessary to protect an industry that, as you have heard, was started back in 1984 with the foresight of our national hero, Sir Simeon Daniel, but enlarged and expanded by the Honorable Vance Amory in 1994 and following. So I believe that there has always been unanimity in relation to the relevance of the financial services sector, and we are seeing it here on display today. So I thank the member opposite for her support, resounding support, which we clearly detect from her silence on this matter. I also thank her for not taking objection to anything that has been said. So it must be that she, too, is of a view that we are doing the right thing. Mr. President, I believe then that there is nothing more than I can add but to bring the debate to a close and ask that the bill shortly entitled Nevis International Insurance Amendment Bill 2021 be read a second time.
Mr. President, I rise to support the motion.
Question is that the bill shortly entitled the Nevis International Insurance Amendment Ordinance 2021 be read a second time and pass. Those in second time. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill to amend the Nevis International Insurance Ordinance, Cap 7.07, and for matters related thereto or connected therewith.
The bill has been read a second time. House in committee.
Section 24.
The question is that Section 24 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 23.
The question is that Section 23 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 22.
The question is that Section 22 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 21.
Question is that Section 21 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 20.
Question is that Section 20 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 19.
Question is that Section 19 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 18.
Question is that Section 18 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 17.
Mr. Chairman, at paragraph 17, 2A. Paragraph 17, subparagraph 2A. It says, on the petition of the registrar of the registered insurer, being unable to pay its debts in within. So we will want to remove the in. It's a typo there, Mr. President. Yes, you are?
Yes, sir. Question is that the subsection 17 2A is amended in the second line, which should read, to pay its debt within meaning of the subsection 4A, 4R. So the in is out, is taken out? Yes. Yes. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 16.
Section 16 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 15.
The question is that Section 15 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 14.
Mr. Chairman, at section 14B, inserting a new subsection 4 as follows. A registered insurer who has directors in contravention of this section commits an offense and shall be subject to a fine of $20,000 imposed by the Financial Services Regulatory Commission, Nevis branch. You want the words Nevis branch added.
Point taken.
That's okay?
Yes.
No. Not necessary. So the money was in it. Yeah, but you use Nevis branch out. So suppose it's a fine and the money got a signature. What you must say? Nevis branch.
Question that section 14 B, subsection 4, the addition of after Financial Services Regulatory Commission, Nevis branch is then added. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 30.
Before you go on, it's expressed throughout with a dash, then Nevis branch. So just to be consistent. Huh? Dash, yes. Dash Nevis branch.
Yeah. And the inverted commas,
So Financial Services Regulatory Commission, dash
Nevis branch. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 13.
Question is that section 13 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 12.
Section 12 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 11.
Question is that section 11 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 10.
Section 10 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. The ayes have it.
Section 9.
Question is that section 9 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 8.
The question is that section 8 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 7,
Question is that Section 7 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 6,
The question is that Section 6 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 5,
Question is that Section 5 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 4,
Question is that Section 4 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 3,
Mr. Chairman, at section 3D,
President.
it says by inserting the following new definition after the definition of regulation. Regulator. It should now read that regulator means the regulator of financial services appointed for Nevis under the Financial Services Regulatory Commission Act. So regulator means the regulator of financial services appointed for Nevis under the Financial Services Regulatory Commission Act. So we redefine what regulator means there, Mr. President.
Regulator means financial.
Regulator means the regulator of financial
services
appointed
for the Nevis
under the Financial Services Regulatory Commission Act.
Yeah. Question is that subsection 3 is amended to section D. Subsection D means financial service appointed to the Nevis.
No. Let me go again, Mr. President. Regulator means the regulator of financial services appointed for Nevis under the Financial Services Regulatory Commission Act. So that is what that provision should now read.
Okay. You have it, right? Mayor, you have it? I'm gonna hold this one. I'll give it right now. Question is that the subsection D, 3D, regulator means the regulator of financial services appointed for Nevis under the Financial Services Act.
Regulatory Commission Act. Financial Services Regulatory Commission Act.
service appointed for Nevis under the Financial Service Regulatory Act Commission. Commission Act.
Chapter number? 2112? 21, full stop 12.
Cap
21.12.
1.12. Under the Financial Services Regulatory Act, Commission Act.
Yes.
Commission Act
2112.
2112 do form part of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 2.
Question is that Section 2 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 1.
Section 1 do form part of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Enacting clause.
The enacting clause do form part of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Title.
Title do form part of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. House resumes its sitting.
Mr. President, I am pleased to report that the bill, shortly entitled the Nevis International Insurance Amendment Bill 2021, has passed through committee stage with some amendments, all of which have been accepted by this Honorable House. And I would therefore respectfully request that the bill be moved a third time and passed. And just to make it clear to the House, this bill had a first reading at a previous sitting, and so there's no need to suspend any of the standing orders. And in addition, to make it clear that the necessary fiat from Her Honor, the Deputy Governor General, has been obtained.
Question is that the bill shortly entitled the Nevis International Insurance Amendment Ordinance 2021 be read a third time. Those in favor? And pass. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill to amend the Nevis International Insurance Ordinance, Cap 7.07, and for matters related thereto or connected therewith.
Bill has been read third time and passed. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Bill passed.
Mr. President, I rise to seek leave and have read a second time the Nevis Physical Planning and Development Control Amendment Bill 2021, and to commence, Mr. President, the debate on this bill. Nevis Physical Planning and Development Control Amendment Bill 2021. Mr. President, what we are seeking to do today is threefold. And I hope that our proposed amendment today, Mr. President, is non-controversial. We are hoping, Mr. President, to have passed in this House today amendment to Section 17 and amendment to Section 31 of the Principal Development and Control Ordinance. Firstly, Mr. President, in Section 17, we are hoping that these amendments today will ensure that we will be able to provide the statutory basis and establish the necessary practice of requiring a full project proposal in respect to large development project on the island of Nevis. We are seeing, Mr. President, that there are some submissions that are coming to the planning department without the requisite project proposal. And we are hoping that the amendment that we are proposing today will ensure that developers and persons representing developers would ensure that the necessary project proposals are submitted to our planning department. Secondly, Mr. President, we are also hoping to broaden the categories of documents required as evidence of ownership to include grants of probate and letters of administration. There again, Mr. President, we want to make sure that the ownership documents and certain procedures are in place whenever an application is submitted to our planning department. We have had cases where persons would have submitted application to our planning department and properties were left for relatives. But because of certain procedures that are not completed as yet, the planning department is faced with some challenges and some difficulties. We want to tidy up that, Mr. President. And thirdly, we are saying, Mr. President, that when an application is submitted to our planning department, that while developers are hoping that planning will turn around in an instant, we are hoping as well that persons submitting applications to our planning would also give themselves some time. In Section 31, Mr. President, we are proposing that the deadline for submitting an EIA in the first instance be up to 12 months or any other such time prescribed by the director. Based on the scope of the project or based on the nature of the project, the director may decide that 12 months is a little long, so he may choose to propose 6 months. But if it is, Mr. President, that after the prescribed time, even up to 12 months, and the EIA is not submitted to our planning department, we believe that the planning approval in the concept stage would have lapsed. The reason being, Mr. President, is that there are some proposals that are before planning. That sits there for 12 months, that sits there for 18 months, up to 2 years. And when information are submitted to our planning department, some persons are expecting that the planning department would turn around after waiting the time. Mr. President, as I said, just a few amendments that I believe are not controversial, and I hope that this House will give their full support to these few amendments so that the Nevis Physical Planning and Development Control Amendment Bill 2021 would continue to strengthen the work and the procedures at our planning department. Mr. President, with those very brief words, I hope that this amendment would meet the approval of this honorable House. Thank you.
Mr. President, I rise to support colleague minister and the proposed amendment to the Nevis Physical Planning and Development Control Ordinance, Amendment Bill 2021. I didn't propose to speak very long in my support, but I must say that the minister has set the trend, definitely. Because the matters before us are not very controversial, Mr. President. The amendment, as the minister would have said, simply proposes to give the Department of Physical Planning a little bit more latitude. First of all, it's going to stipulate with the amendment for Section 17 that a full development proposal has to be submitted before a developer can move forward with his development, before he can move forward with submitting plans and so on. That gives the Department of Physical Planning an opportunity to peruse the documents and to see if this is a development or the type of development that we are looking to have here on Nevis. Oftentimes the development process is a little bit fragmented. So this amendment is coming to ensure that we can get a holistic view of the development at a very, very early stage. The amendment bill also seeks to tackle the issue of ownership of land and permission to develop. Oftentimes, this is something that we might, in the general public, gloss over and look over. But it is a serious issue that has affected development on Nevis and the Department of Physical Planning and so on. I would be aware of cases in the past where you've had land that would have belonged to some family member who would have passed on and left the land to, probably without a clear will to say the land belongs to whomever, and had several persons who they left as beneficiaries. And the land would have ended up in dispute. One person might have come to the Department of Physical Planning to say, hey, I want to do some sort of development here. And when asked for the ownership document, they would come and say, well, I'm the owner. Several weeks later, in some cases in the past, we've seen the development happen. And then months later or years later, another relative would come in and say, look, you allowed development on my piece of land. We have cases where that has happened in the past here in Nevis. We are simply looking with this amendment to eliminate those sort of instances. So the amendment to Section 17, where it grants, where the amendment now affords the Department of Physical Planning the latitude to look at grant of probates and letters of administration while the whole process is going through the court, so that people could go ahead and do their development being in the right, having some actual good documentation, not just before you get the title. While you're going through the process of getting the title, it allows them to use the grant of probate or the letters of administration to facilitate the development. So there's nothing really controversial in this bill at all. It just gives a little bit more latitude to the Department of Physical Planning, and that is very, very necessary. We all know the role that physical planning plays here on Nevis and in any country. Sometimes they get a little bad name because when we are doing construction and you're out on the construction site, sometimes when people see planning come around, they start to stiffen up a little bit. But planning is here to protect the integrity of the construction industry on the island, the integrity of development as a whole on the island. We want to ensure that as we develop, that we consider our heritage and that we maintain our unique Nevisian style here on the island. And that is what physical planning is here to protect. Physical planning is here to protect the homeowners also, who do not have the knowledge, the intimate knowledge of construction. It is to ensure that the homes that are built, that they are built according to the proper regulations, that they are built according to the approved and passed plans. And so, Mr. President, I want to lend my support to colleague minister in the passage of this simple amendment, the Nevis Physical Planning and Development Control Amendment Bill 2021. May it please you.
Mr. President, I once again rise to wrap up and wish this bill safe passage through this honorable House. I want to thank my predecessor for his support of this bill. Mr. President, as I said earlier, it's a non-controversial bill. The aim is to ensure that we strengthen the processes at our planning department so they can function more efficiently and effectively to the people of Nevis, Mr. President. Thank you. So, Mr. President, I therefore seek that the bill be read a second time and pass.
No, second time.
Second time.
Mr. President, I rise to second the motion.
Question is that the bill shortly entitled the Nevis Physical Planning and Development Control Ordinance Cap 6109 be read second time. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill to amend the Nevis Physical Planning and Development Control Ordinance, Chapter 6.09, and for matters related thereto or connected therewith.
The bill has been read a second time. Housing Committee.
Section 4.
Question is that Section 4 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 3.
Question is that Section 3 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 2.
Question is that Section 2 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 1.
Section 1 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Enacting clause.
Question is that enacting clause do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Title.
Question is that title do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. House resume.
Mr. President, I rise to report that this Honorable House, that the bill shortly entitled the Nevis Physical Planning and Development Control Amendment Bill 2021 has passed through committee stage without any amendments. And I seek your leave to have Rule 57 of the standing orders be waived so that the bill can be moved a third time and pass.
Mr. President, I rise to second the motion.
Question is that the bill shortly entitled Nevis Physical Development and Control Ordinance Cap 6109 be read a third time and pass. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill to amend the Nevis Physical Planning and Development Control Ordinance, Chapter 6.09, and for matters related thereto or connected therewith.
The bill has been read a third time and passed.
Mr. President, I rise and seek your leave for the adjournment of this Honorable House until 2 p.m. this afternoon.
Mr. President, I rise to second the motion.
Question is that this House be adjourned until 2 p.m. this afternoon. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? Ayes have it. House adjourned.